no funding for schools that are now trying to reopen, and according to the White House, they want them to reopen. So they need legislation. It's the only way to do it.
I want to bring in Wes Moore, who is an entrepreneur and the CEO of the anti-poverty group, the Robin Hood Foundation. Thank you so much for joining me. So I'm sure you've taken a look at the president's executive action. Theoretically, it would provide $300 in federal benefits to each person, but that person has to live in a state where the state requests it and the state agrees to give $100 as well, so that the person would get an additional $400. I mean, is there anything realistic in your view about this?
No, I mean, it's saying that this is the administration acting unilaterally is just disingenuous. It's essentially offering the states an unfunded call option. So I mean, we have to also be clear about where we are. We have the highest rates of unemployment since the Great Depression, the worst economy we have had in a century, and tens of millions of people whose livelihood are at risk right now, and a virus that's still wreaking havoc. This is a very real crisis that we're still in the middle of. And when you look at the executive orders, they're not commensurate and do not begin to address the magnitude of the crisis. And a part of the problem is this caveat that it has a reliance on the state picking up a significant portion of the tab. I mean, New York alone, Governor Cuomo, we talked about the inability for New York to do it. His state projects a $30 billion budget shortfall over the next 2 years. States cannot print money. There is no Maryland dollars. The federal government alone can increase liquidity into the markets. So to ask the states to take on this burden when the states are already going to have to spend the next 12 and 24 months just thinking about how to cut is unfair.
I want to talk to you about evictions. The moratorium on evictions that was put into place in the statute and the CARES Act originally, when Congress and the White House first did act, when this pandemic started, that expired. The president announced that he was putting a freeze on that, but we know in looking at it, it only suggests that his various federal agencies look into doing that. It doesn't put a freeze on it. I know you're in New York, where the governor has put a temporary freeze on, but what should Americans out there who are very concerned, and there are a whole lot of them, about being able to pay their rent and worried about being evicted know about the president's proposal?
Dana, we don't have time to look into this. We know what's going to happen. We don't need another study. That's going to take time. We actually very early on called on the moratorium on evictions and the moratorium on utility shutoffs because we saw what was going to happen. And the truth is that there's about 23 million renters across the country right now who will not be able to pay next month's rent. 23 million people, close to 10% of our population. And this is also going to happen, by the way, when we're having schools getting ready to reopen. This is also going to happen at a time when we still have a virus that we're asking people to socially distance. But what we're also going to do is put this extraordinary pressure on shelters and other places that are going to have to help to house people. And we're also doing it at a time where we're going into the winter months. And so this last round of federal aid that we had along with federal and state evictions moratorium, that wasn't just something that was important to do. That literally kept people alive. And so we don't need to study it. We don't need to understand what the impacts are going to be if this moratorium is not extended. We know that 30 to 40 million people will be at risk of eviction in 2020 if we do not act and if we do not work on ways of extending that moratorium for our families who are going to be most challenged during this period.
And the irony is that the House Speaker actually wanted, this is one area where she wanted the administration, the president, to put a real moratorium. She thought he did have the legal ability to do that, a moratorium on evictions, and he didn't even go that far. Wes Moore, thank you so much for your insight. I really appreciate you joining me this afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.